A comprehensive assessment of pesticide residues in 2 vegetable farming municipalities in Benguet. The application of pesticide in farms and gardens is a common practice among farmers. Most pesticides are chemicals that are used in agriculture for the control of pests, weeds, or plant diseases. After a pesticide is applied, it may meet a variety of fates. The residues are left on the sprayed surfaces of the crop. It may be lost to the atmosphere, carried away to the surface water through runoff and erosions, or leached downward into the soil. In effect, most pesticides create some risk or harm to people, animals, or the environment. Farm workers in developing countries are especially vulnerable to pesticide poisoning because most pesticides are applied by hand. The use of protective equipment is rare. Children play in the fields treated with pesticides, and worse, some families reuse pesticide containers to store food and drinking water. An earlier study on Benguet farmers revealed too that they frequently exceed the pesticide dosages, apply pesticide close to the time of harvest, use mixtures of several pesticides, or fail to read and follow labels and instructions. It is the awareness of the effects and threats that pesticide use can pose on human health and the environment that promoted the conduct of this study. The general objective of this study is to determine the impact of agrochemical applications on the environment and human health. The general objective of this study is to determine the impact of agrochemical applications on the environment and human health. The objective is to assess the practices and extent of pesticide use by farmers, the presence and quantity of pesticide residues in selected crops, soil and water samples, and the level of organophosphate pesticide toxicity in the farmer respondents as determined by the cholinesterase test. To identify the practices of farmers on the use of pesticides, to determine the concentrations of pesticide residues in soils, crops, and water, to determine the concentrations of some heavy metals in soil and water, to identify the symptoms among farmers that can be associated with pesticide use, and to determine the level of pesticide residue toxicity among farmers as indicated by the cholinesterase test. For the study sites, the researchers chose 2 vegetable farming municipalities in Benguet, namely Kapangan and Bugyas. These 2 municipalities engage in vegetable farming for both subsistence and income generation, thus the quantity and the quality of the vegetable products are of utmost concern to them. To address health and environmental concerns more comprehensively, different methods of data gathering were utilized. Firstly, needs analysis was conducted through interviews with farmers and family members as well as consultations with key persons, municipal officials, and school administrators. Secondly, diagnostic tests were done during the medical dental outreach activities. Blood samples were collected from the farmer respondents for the cholinesterase test and complete blood count. The cholinesterase test is a toxic-specific laboratory analytical procedure for organophosphate pesticide toxicity. The medical history of the patients was also taken to identify possible previous pesticide poisoning. Thirdly, samples of soil, water, and vegetable were collected from pre-identified collection sites in the 2 municipalities. Standard collection procedures were strictly followed. These samples were subjected to laboratory analysis using gas chromatography to determine the level of pesticide residues in them. Practices of farmers in the use of pesticide. The result of interviews with 102 farmer respondents from Kapangan and 91 from Bugyas regarding their practices on pesticide